Hi, thanks for joining me for another video. Really appreciate you listening in. So in this video, I want to weave together a vision I had just now, well, not just now, just a short while ago, sorry, which is, I don't believe necessarily prophetic. It could be, but it certainly represented an anxiety in the world and possibly a future outcome or strategy at least, or natural event. Okay. So I want to weave that with some of the things that I've mentioned before, which I think are very important for the public to be aware, to raise awareness about, okay? And, and that all these things are interlinked, okay? And they're also linked with messages I've received from God, all that is, source, and other beings, again, in moments of grace, and wanting to pass things on to people that might save lives, help people out of suffering, and break the cycle of trauma on our planet, to show, but more importantly, unconditional love and acceptance and grace towards all beings. And I think, if we look at, so let's look at this. So, okay, the vision I had today was a flash, a very bright flash, okay? A very bright flash, and there was a person, I'm not going to describe them, but there was a person in the corner of the image, and they were sort of like looking, like it was so bright that they were looking, they had their shades on, and they weren't looking direct, they couldn't look directly at it, or it was just very brilliant light, okay? As soon as I saw that, I had the intuition it represented nuclear war or a nuclear strike of some kind, okay? But I also afterwards had the intuition that it could represent a micronova event, which Ben Davidson has spoken about as a possibility, and I've seen things in visions which suggest that this could happen at some point, okay? So again, I've seen two suns in the sky. I've seen a couple of things in terms of visions that make me wonder if this is going to happen. Certainly a Carrington style event is definitely possible, and lots of other things as well, seismic activity and all sorts of things that I've seen and heard. But again, so micronova, okay. So micronova, and a micronova would be related to the pole shift we are undergoing right now, and also the activity in the galactic current sheet, as Ben Davidson described, and all these things sort of aligning at some point in the future, okay? All right, so, okay. So I had that vision, okay. Why is that vision important? Okay. So the vision's important because it may seem that at some point in the future, say for instance, a conflict erupts on the planet, and it might look like it's a false flag event. So something may happen which may instigate it, okay? So it could be anything, all right? Or there could be a narrative popped out into the public, which basically, makes it seem as though conflict is the only route, or there's no choice, or that there's something happening beyond humanity's the public's immediate control that demands the shutting down of society, okay, that sort of thing, which is very possible, okay, very likely as well, to be honest, from what I can tell. What I would say about that, why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this because in order to stop these things from happening, because to the public, and it's not the public's fault, but to the public, it may look, what they see on BBC News, okay, for instance, what they see on BBC News, what they see on, I don't know, CNN or whatever it is people watch, France 24, whatever it is, Al Jazeera, whatever news channel they watch, they take it as, what's being shown. Obviously, we don't know the whole story, but they think, and it's not people it's just a matter of awareness. They think that that's the story, okay? That that's the reason, that's the story, but it's not true, okay? That's not true. Like, there are there's subterranean activity and interests and a bigger plan, like a much more long-term strategy that's been devised, again, beyond, not even within our government, okay? Not even within our government, but on a transnational basis, okay? And so so again, this is being said without blame. The reason why I'm saying this again is because we have first of all, the public should be aware that this is what's happening, and it is so, okay? Take a look at I think the Jeffrey Epstein situation, provides an opportunity for us to actually notice that these things are happening, okay? So beyond, obviously, the stories of abuse and all these other things that have happened, I think, there are also very, very interesting and telling emails forgive me, there are also very telling emails which suggest a very high interest in significant interest in advanced technology, consciousness, UAP, non-human intelligence, and so on, okay? So like they said, there's an interest in the metaphysical and in advanced technology, okay? And also in how to influence human behavior and so on, okay? But those things have taken a back seat, and believe me, I'm not minimizing, and nor am I know what I think about this, okay? And my perspective is more radical in the sense that, again, I don't judge or blame Jeffrey Epstein. I think everybody is being victimized by these dynamics on our planet in some way or another. And my belief is that everybody is loved unconditionally, and there's a reason why people do things they do that's beyond their control often, okay? And that we should be compassionate if we can, all right? But at the same time, it doesn't minimize, obviously, the suffering that's, these things have caused in the world, again, okay, so I'm not minimizing anyone's suffering here, okay, when I say that. So there's that. And then, so those things are hinted at in the emails, and there's an opportunity there, okay, for us to take notice, or for awareness to be drawn, I think is the better thing to say. For awareness to be drawn to those things, for the public's benefit, so that they can be aware that such interests and activities take place in the world, okay? This is important for many reasons, okay? It's important, ontologically speaking, more than anything. Or more than anything, in fact, it absolutely is, mainly ontologically, and also the human suffering aspect as well, okay? Ontologically speaking, what these interests tell us and support is that the idea, and not just in those emails, by the way, obviously in other documents, declassified CIA documents, declassified US Army documents, and so on, which very clearly demonstrate that people within these communities are aware that we are not our bodies, okay? They have a very good understanding, and you make use of ESP and consciousness-based consciousness awareness in their activities. And again, it's not their fault, okay, that people don't know about that. It's not people's fault that they don't know, okay? It's not their fault that these people haven't been able to tell people about that fact, because the fact is that these people, yes, of course, they have that awareness, but they are also under immense pressure, okay? Immense pressure, okay? They are under restrictions. They have, non-disclosure agreements, all sorts of considerations, potential retaliation against their families, and individually if they speak up about things, as we see, many people have gone, have fallen under, have been targeted as a result of that, okay, of their attempts to sort of share insight, I know this because of my own experience, okay, and so, it's a very real thing, a very real consideration. No sooner did they walk through the door, I think, in their role, in their job, an occupation, whether it's in the armed forces or in I don't know, CIA, MI5, whatever, KGB, as soon as they walk through the door slams behind them. And I think that in that sense, it's very difficult for them to get back out again. There's all sorts of limitations that are placed. Yes, they have access to tremendous insight, in lots of areas, but they also have a lot of restrictions placed on them. And there's a human cost to that. There's a lot of suffering that comes with that, okay? Lots and lots of suffering. A lot of these people have PTSD symptoms. They're targeted as well by direct energy weapons. Some of them, like myself, a lot of them are watched like hawks. Like, I don't think a lot of these people can like move without. Their movements are probably very closely scrutinized. I'm not just speculating on this. This is kind of what I've observed from and what intuited from my experience of being a target, and being sort of under the watch of these people, so to speak. I think, and this is why it matters so much. It's not just about, like I said, the technology. It's not about knowing about technology and UAP and non-human intelligence for the sake of knowing about it. There's an ontological aspect, but there's also a tremendous human rights aspect as well, and a lot of suffering that goes along with the lack of freedom and lack of insight in the public domain about what is happening behind closed doors. Just because people have a professional title, okay, just because they may, I don't know, they're a general or whatever it is, just because they may have some so-called high status job, okay, whatever that means, just because they have that doesn't mean they're not human beings, and it doesn't mean they don't make mistakes. It doesn't mean they're not subject to pressures or that they don't need support, and it doesn't mean that that we can't open our hearts to them and that they don't need our help on this side of things, okay? Just because you're in these professions doesn't mean that you're hard or tough, like that you don't need a community, or that you don't need understanding from the wider public. They need that from the public. These people really want to get information out to the public, okay? I'm not saying all of them, and it's very difficult because there are complex reasons why they can't a lot of these people can't share insight. And again, I'm not saying this goes across, not everybody is the same, okay? But I feel like there are people who genuinely want to share information about the nature of UAP, all these things. They want these things to come out, but it's a bit of a dance, okay? It's a dance because there are national security considerations. There are all kinds of other things that they've got to think about. It's a complex world, like I said. So what's the answer? Okay, what's the answer here? And obviously, the implications of sharing with the public that, that there's awareness that we are not our bodies, that ESP is real and used, and that consciousness is, accessible, is something, we are not our bodies, and that there's a lot of awareness about consciousness, and, and all these things, lovely, wonderful things that could change people's lives that people sadly can't exactly go around shouting about in these communities, who are, those who want disclosures, but they try their best within their remit, within the scope of their ability, and they do they're doing their best, a lot of these people, to share those insights. But it's very tough. you know. But the phenomenon sorry, can I say, so awareness about consciousness, however, would really, really, really shift humanity in many ways towards, breaking this trauma cycle, realizing the subtle influences in our world, realizing the influence of thought, the influence of the phenomenon, the influence, all sorts of things that could really, really sort of really make people look again at their lives and each other, and see each other anew, perhaps feel more, again, relieve a lot of suffering, and perhaps people appreciate one of those predicaments more from a consciousness-based and compassionate perspective, with more sort of, with more of the detail added to the picture about why things happen as they do sometimes, okay, in this world. And so disclosure matters really more for the humanitarian side and the ontological side than it does anything else. Although the technological things really do matter. I mean, they're very interesting and very important, but at the same time, there is an important the most important thing is to do with ontology and human rights. The humanitarian side, also links with planetary changes. Again, there's a suppression of information regarding these planetary changes, which people, aren't aware of. A lot of people aren't even aware that these are the causes, the geomagnetic pole shift and AMOC decline, that these things are very much like, I mean, there's information out there, but it's not exactly headline news, and that's very deliberate, okay? And there are people out there who, rightly or wrongly, I don't agree with it myself, but I know it's a complex world, like I said, okay? It's very complex, okay? And I don't believe that people want people to be, deceived, or not, or that maybe a small group of people do, and if they do, that's not their fault, okay? But I don't believe generally that, like, a lot of people in these groups want people not to know what's happening, okay? I don't believe that's true. But what I do think is that they have a lot of things, like very complex variables and considerations, and like a lot of them have their hands tied about some of these things, and it's not their fault. So there's that as well. So, again, surfacing the global network is a priority, should be a priority for us, okay? Disclosures should be a priority for us, okay? And the two things go hand in hand. Disclosures and the surfacing of this network, they go hand in hand. How can we do this in a way that really does help us to break the trauma cycle on the planet, to assist or change things in such a way that we feel that we can offer universal amnesty to these people, and and really change things permanently for all? I think a few things here highlighting. So first of all, okay, devolving consciousness insight. Okay, making humanity, the rest of the population, aware of what has already been researched, and secret programs, devolving that insight to the public, okay? And that's what I'm kind of trying to do in my own way on GeoShift, okay? Whatever I come across, I try and post on GeoShift, okay? Because I think people should be aware that that there is an established interest and research into these things that, again, people, if others were aware of, they would be very surprised to learn the reality of these things, okay? And it's not about knowing for the sake of knowing. It's a big piece in this puzzle. Consciousness, understanding, and insight will help others understand the other aspects of this as well, okay? So consciousness, insight, okay, is a big thing. And the metaphysical, as well. Consciousness, insight, and the metaphysical. So that's one thing. The next thing, forgive me, consciousness, sorry, forgive me, consciousness, insight, and metaphysical. And the next thing would be, forgive me, sorry, my memory has become very bad due to what I've been through. So forgive me, my short-term memory is appalling. But consciousness, insight, okay, into what's, into, consciousness, awareness, metaphysical, I think the consciousness aspect should come first and then build upon that with them, what will come from that is a further understanding of the metaphysical, but the two things, yes, absolutely. And then what also, we could be doing is using that foundation of understanding of consciousness and to also appreciate things such as samskaras, thought forms, okay? Thought forms and samskaras, how they and karma, which are basically called karmas in Buddhism, okay, and how thought affects our experience in this world. Not only our thoughts, but those of others and the energies of others, and how much we build up over our lives that's actually not true about ourselves, okay? The mechanism of thought is very important to understanding, appreciating how people get into the predicaments they get into, okay, and forming a good basis for universal amnesty, okay. I've done a lot of exploring with this, okay, a lot of intensive, really excruciating, grueling self-inquiry. And it's I can tell you from experience that this is a thing, that thought, and this is not just me who said this, okay, thought traps us. I say trap, it forms the basis of experience here on this planet, but again it can cause a lot of suffering as well, and realizing that, and misidentification, and taking on board what forms our identity through thought forms and things like that. The moment that we're born to the moment we die, we are accruing samskaras, thought forms in our field. And like I said, a lot of it is based on things that are not actually true about who we are, okay? A lot of these things are based on, from my experience, things that are not true about us, and that we inherit. And it's actually very sad. It's very sad if you think about it. You're a child, you come into the world, and I think about this a lot, or, I've given this a lot of thought. And you're a child, you come into the world, and, you start, again, you have all this hope, all this expectation about, or hope, you're very, you're here open, okay? You're open, aren't you? You're open to your experience, you're hopeful, your heart is open, you have all that expectation, again, it's not quite as defined as that with a child, but there's a sense of it, isn't there? And then, but over time, that sort of gets, so imagine, how's the best way to put it? Imagine yourself as a child, you're like a sponge, okay? And that sponge over time gets filled, all the holes in the sponge are filled with dirt, okay, or rocks, or small rocks, okay, or whatever it is, all those holes. So you're a sponge, okay, the human being is a sponge, it comes into the world as a sponge, and it absorbs everything around it, and it gets filled, like I said, the sponge gets filled with all this with dirt, whatever it is, okay, however you want to think of it. But again, those holes, so again, that dirt represents thought forms and samskaras, okay? All those, so you got that sponge, and then all those holes, like I said, are filled with dirt, okay? Samskaras and thought forms, okay? And those build up over time, okay? It is like a psychic plaque, okay? That builds up, that covers, our true nature over time. So again, there's lots of different ways you could think about this, okay? Lots of different ways you can describe this, okay? I'm trying to give as many as I can. I'm trying to make this as accessible as possible, people. But that's what happens. And you absorb those things from experience the moment you start perceiving, the moment you start experiencing in this world, the moment you're aware, conscious in this world, the moment that is when you start growing, like absorbing things like that. And a lot of what you absorb is lies, okay, about you. You inherit things in people, ideas about who people think you are, okay? Ideas about who people think you are, ideas about your identity, again, and those ideas that people try and tell you about are based on lies that people have been told about themselves, the people who are telling you, okay? So again, it's like an inherited false beliefs about us. Nonetheless, and this is the paradox, they are very beautiful, very, very beautiful, okay? Very beautiful, beautiful as well, because they tell us a lot about the human condition, okay? And about life. It's more rich than that, but at the same time, they can be cause a lot of suffering, okay? So it's important to highlight this, because by understanding this, we can have compassion for people who gather things in their field which don't belong to them and tell them lies, which is what these samskaras do, okay? And believe me, I've spent hundreds of hours, okay, thinking and contemplating this, okay? And I have found, the deception of thought, how thought is deceptive, okay? Thought is very, very deceptive, very, very deceptive, okay? How thought does this to you. Again, we can have compassion for people who get sucked into thought patterns which deceive them, and make them think things about themselves and act in ways which betray who they really are, okay? Forgive me. So that is basically, and this is complemented very much by messages I have received, channeled messages I have received from God, Source, all that is, and also our friends in spirit and angelic friends, Jesus as well, Ramdas, lots of people, my mum, lots of people, God bless her. Lots of people have come through saying the same thing, okay? And that all it is, loves everything unconditionally. It sees us as its eternal children, okay? We are its eternal children. We are loved, it loves us unconditionally. There's, again, as Bill Hicks said, there is nothing we can ever do to change that at all. We are one with God, and he loves us. And that's literally what Bill Hicks said. And it's true. It's true. That's not a lie. Everybody is loved unconditionally, no matter who you are, no matter what you've done. And I have seen that myself from my own experience, God's grace and how much God loves. I felt that love. I can't live without God. I can't do it. Like I love it so much. It's just, I love it so much. I can't tell you. It makes me cry sometimes just thinking about it. And like I said, that love is for everyone. It's not just me. It's for everything, okay? It's in everything and it's for everything, okay? And so, again, now, let's keep this in mind. So God, all it is, loves all things. None are condemned. Hell is not real, okay? If that is true, and if there are influences in consciousness, which are affecting human beings in ways that we can feel compassion towards, plus the fact that we are seen as eternal children who are loved unconditionally by God, and and all our predicaments are appreciated and none are judged, then in that case, we have the basis for, I believe, for a universal amnesty for all beings involved, so all humans involved in these activities, these secret programs, and so on, okay? We have a very, very sound basis for that. We have... but this requires consciousness awareness. This requires disclosures to take place. The influence of the phenomenon is one of the big disclosures that we should be aiming for. It's not enough just to... I say this, you know, with the greatest respect, you know, it's not, and I know this isn't people's fault, but it's not just enough, forgive me, to show pictures of UAP, okay? It's not just enough. There needs to be a narrative, okay? And and there's no narrative at the moment, okay? But I think people are aware what's happening. And the truth is that actually a lot of that what you consider, so greys, for instance, they're not physical beings, okay? They're not physical. They're astral entities, okay? Understanding these entities, understanding the phenomenon, non-human intelligence, is going to require a consciousness awareness, okay? It's going to require awareness. It's also, and it's going to, oddly enough, and I never thought I'd say this in a million years up until a few months ago, but it's going to require insight about the you know, entities which are actually mentioned in the Bible, for instance, like the Watchers, Nephilim, and so on, okay? It's going to require that, okay? It's going to require that because these beings are actually are actually, how can I say it, legitimate entities, so to speak, okay? You know, all right? I've encountered them many times. I know the Watchers are real. I know that greys are associated with the Watchers. Nordics are not from the Pleiades. Nordics are very much aligned with the Watchers, okay, and the greys, okay. Reptilians, mantis beings, all seem to me, and I you know, again, I'm not the first person who has said this, but I believe they are AI related, okay? There's something to do with AI and these beings that I think is important, okay? I feel like they are part of one AI consciousness. And I'm not the only person who said this. There was, I think, like a German whistleblower who said something very similar, and you know, sort of made me think, you know, that maybe, you know, I sort of defer to that, to what they've said quite a few times sometimes when I think about this. But with that said, we're not trapped by these beings. We're not trapped by them, okay? God is real. You know, we're fine, okay? There's nothing to be scared of, all right? It's fine. We are going to be fine, okay? In that sense. But nonetheless, they are an influence and they are a friction in this reality and they cause a lot of suffering, okay? And what they love to do is use perception. They like to use perception, thought, emotion. They like to keep people stuck in that web, okay? And basically, you know, that is why it's important, if we can, to identify their influence, because I believe that they influence people a lot through astral abductions, other kinds that, like consciousness, you know, experiences in thought insertion, emotion. I've experienced this before, thought and emotion insertion, you know, deliberate provocation, and you know, again, they are like a friction in this reality. They're a friction, okay? A lot of people don't understand or know or realize their influence, but they do. You know, they do have a big influence on humanity, and that influence should be highlighted because it would liberate a lot of people in the process. We should all be going through this together. Just because you work for the CIA or the US military or the British Armed Forces or MI5 or wherever it is, KGB, whatever it is, okay? Just because you work for these groups doesn't mean that everybody can handle everything by themselves and that everybody knows everything and everybody's doing the right things at the right time. Okay, that's not true. Okay, they are human beings. Okay, like that is not actually true that that's the case. You know, I'm not the first person or the last person who will speak about this, like that as the phenomenon being metaphysical beings. Being, you know, non-physical. James Semivan, who worked for the CIA, he's alluded to this many times, and also Luna, you know, Anna Paulina Luna, she's alluded to it. Lou Elizondo has alluded to it. You know, J.D. Vance has alluded to it. Even Barack Obama has hinted at it in some ways, because he said, like, if I thought if there were you know, I think, what was it, if we had I don't know if he said UAP, or if we had you know, bodies, that I would know about it. I don't think he was lying. Okay, I don't think he was lying when he said that. I actually think that was quite a transparent. I think that was quite a like, there was a truth in that. Okay, I feel like there was a truth. I would be very surprised, and I'm not saying it's not possible, but I would be very surprised if we have physical, biological, extraterrestrial bodies in our possession. Okay, because my experience has been that they are astral beings. They are not physical. Okay. This doesn't preclude, obviously, contact with real extraterrestrials, but these beings are not extraterrestrial in the sense that they are extraterrestrial in one sense, okay, but they're not extraterrestrial in the sense that they are actually not from this plane of reality, okay? They're on an adjacent strata. So Jim Semivan has alluded to it. Other people have alluded to it. You know, as well. Again, like I said, there are clues, okay? There are clues, okay? A lot of what we experience is man-made. A lot of this has to do with advanced technology, the legacy of the Cold War, secret programs that were established in the Cold War, you know, as a result of defense, protective measures and competition with other countries, trying to stay ahead of the game in terms of consciousness, insights and awareness as well. Even that was up for grabs from what I can tell. You know, and there's a secret society influence there as well, okay? So again, like I said, just because you work for these groups of people does not mean that you know, first of all, know everything, do the right things at the right time, should be held exclusively accountable for those things as well, and that you don't need the support, or don't yearn for that support from the public, or awareness from the public in some ways, because again, that the pressures that are on these people, some of them I think are immense, okay? They're under a lot of pressure, okay? As a result of what they know, okay? And what they deal with, what they have to cope with, what they have to keep up here, okay, is I would imagine, you know, based on my experience, and obviously I don't know everything, but it's probably very difficult for some of these people, okay? Because there's a lot of things, that the very serious, intense issues that, you know, that they have to sort of keep under a hat, so to speak, okay? And that's very they're human beings. That's very difficult, okay? It's difficult to live a life like that. And I think we're at a point now where almost like we're sort of bursting at the seams, okay? In terms of like a yearning to break out of this pattern. I believe that that's why we have this, in part, have a movement towards disclosure, because of the fact that, like I said, there are people who just think this is it, like that, we've got to stop doing this, like the human cost has been too much. And I think, you know, I think there are some things that the public must be engaged with that, okay? We as the public should be more, I think we can be more engaged with this if we have it's a matter of exposure to the issues, to, you know, awareness of the circumstances of people involved in these activities, and, you know, and therefore nurturing compassion towards them, allowing, opening our hearts to them, and realizing, like I said, that you know, a lot of them are in circumstances where they've been compelled to do things out of a sense of obligation, but also force, coercion, like I said, coercion, necessity, a sense of duty, complex reasons, national security, all these things, okay? You know, it's not their fault, like I said, that they've ended up in this situation, and everything happens for a reason. It's all very important to appreciate that. But again, this isn't going to happen without the public getting on board, okay? It's not. This isn't going to happen, not properly. It's not going to happen. We may get a partial disclosure, okay? We may get partial disclosures of things, but getting full disclosure and what we really need to know isn't going to happen unless we open up, okay? And unless we become more, unless we become, there's an opportunity for this universal amnesty, okay, or an understanding of why people do the things they do. Also, okay, the reason why I say this is because there are a lot, like I said, a lot of the people in this subterranean network probably want or would need, or maybe they, I don't know if they want it or not, but would need the public's understanding, compassion and understanding, okay, in order to feel that they could come back into the community and join the wider world again. A lot of these people are in this network, okay, yeah, obligate all these other things, but a lot of them feel that they have no escape, okay, and there is no life for them beyond, that nobody would understand what they've been through or what they've had to do. And I think, yes, well, obviously, some of the things I think that they've been involved with have probably been very harrowing or very, serious. But at the same time, they shouldn't be forced, that we shouldn't be leaving them to bear that burden alone, because it obviously affects them adversely, it affects their families and communities, it affects us all, and we also affect them by not, inversely affect them by not having that awareness as well, okay, because they can't be supported. So our awareness helps them. Also, however, we can apply these things to our lives as well, because again, these people aren't raised in vacuums. They were raised in, they went to schools, they were raised in, like, we got to think about our own lives, our own traumas, our own ways of being that contribute to the world as well, okay? The world that we live in. And again, that awareness on an individual basis, like person by person, could really, again, change things, for the rest of the planet. A lot of the people, and break the human trauma cycle, like I said, which is really important, okay? On the basis of awareness, like I said, how we are influenced by the phenomenon, okay? How they try to influence us, consciousness, awareness, understanding of God, how it sees us, all these other things, okay, that could really help, sort of, again, foster compassion and understanding towards, ourselves and these people. So we have that opportunity before us, okay, but it's gonna require movements of lots of different parts and lots of different directions, okay, and so in that case, like I said, everybody's got a part to play potentially in changing the way that changing these dynamics on our planet, okay. Again, this is more about human rights and ontology, our sense of reality and who we are, than it has anything to do with anything else ultimately, okay. And we need this ahead of planetary change. Well, not as planetary changes unfold. We need it because, going back to the vision I had, if we don't do these things, okay, and if we don't change the way we look at this, and again, whatever happens, okay, but if we don't change the way we look at things, then we're going to end up potentially harming each other and the planet in such a way, or living through things that, potentially could cause a lot of destruction and harm to the well-being, potentially cause a lot of suffering to the planet and ourselves, okay? So this is very important, okay? Very important indeed. And we must look at this as an urgent issue, an urgent thing, something that urgently needs to be addressed, for these reasons, okay? So thank you for listening, and take good care. Thank you.